I want you to think about something for just a moment. Think about the last time you felt truly thirsty. Not just a passing dryness in your throat, but a deep, almost desperate thirst. Now, I want you to consider something that most doctors will never tell you in a 15-minute appointment. By the time you feel that thirst, your blood sugar may have already been climbing for hours. And the reason has nothing to do with what you ate. It has everything to do with something most people completely overlook: the way they drink water. My name is Dr. James Whitfield. I have spent over 30 years working with older adults managing type 2 diabetes and metabolic conditions. I have sat across from thousands of patients who were doing everything right, taking their medication, watching their carbohydrates, walking every day, and still couldn't understand why their numbers kept fluctuating. And after all those years, after all those consultations, I can tell you with absolute certainty that one of the most underestimated tools in the management of blood sugar for seniors is not a pill, not a supplement, and not a complicated diet. It is water, but not just water. The right water, consumed the right way, at the right moments of the day. What I am about to share with you is not a shortcut or a miracle. It is science. It is physiology. It is something your body has been trying to tell you for years, but that no one has taken the time to properly translate for you. And once you understand it, you will never look at a simple glass of water the same way again. Let me take you back to a patient I will call Margaret. She was 73 years old when she first came to my practice. Her A1C, the measurement we use to track average blood sugar over 3 months, was sitting at 8.4. That's high. Not dangerously high, but high enough to cause long-term damage to her kidneys, her nerves, her eyes. She was already on 2 medications. She was eating well. Her daughter drove her to every appointment. She was, by any measure, a highly compliant patient. And still, her blood sugar readings at home were all over the place. Some mornings she would wake up and her fasting glucose was 145. Other mornings it was 178. She couldn't find a pattern, neither could her previous doctor. On her 3rd visit with me, I asked her something no one had asked before. I asked her to walk me through exactly how she drank water throughout the day. She looked at me as if the question didn't make sense. She told me she drank when she was thirsty. She had a cup of tea in the morning, a glass of water with lunch, and sometimes another one with dinner. She never drank plain water in between because, as she said, she simply didn't feel the need. That was the moment I realized we had found the hidden variable. Margaret wasn't managing her blood sugar with food alone. She was unknowingly undermining it with chronic low-grade dehydration that her body had stopped signaling properly. Here is what happens to the aging body and why this matters so much. When we are young, our hypothalamus, the region of the brain responsible for thirst, is exquisitely sensitive. The moment our blood becomes even slightly more concentrated, it sends a signal. We feel thirsty. We drink. Balance is restored. But as we age past 60, this mechanism becomes blunted. Studies published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society have shown that older adults can be clinically dehydrated and feel absolutely nothing. No dry mouth, no fatigue, no headache, nothing. The thirst alarm simply stops going off with the same urgency it once did. And this creates a dangerous loop that directly affects blood sugar. Here is how it works at the cellular level. When you are dehydrated, the volume of water in your bloodstream decreases. When there is less water in your blood, whatever glucose is present becomes more concentrated. It becomes more dense. Your fasting blood glucose reading goes up, not because you ate more carbohydrates, but simply because your blood is thicker. At the same time, your kidneys, which under normal hydrated conditions would filter and eliminate excess glucose through urine, cannot do their job properly when they don't have enough fluid to work with. So instead of excreting glucose, they hold on to it. Your pancreas detects higher glucose levels and tries to compensate by producing more insulin. But insulin sensitivity in older adults with type 2 diabetes is already reduced. So the pancreas works harder, gets more stressed, and the cycle continues. This is not theoretical. A 2011 study published in Diabetes Care found that lower daily water intake was independently associated with a higher risk of developing hyperglycemia. A 2017 study in the journal Nutrients showed that even mild dehydration, as little as 1% below optimal body water, was enough to measurably impair glucose regulation in older adults. These are not obscure findings. They are sitting in the medical literature, and yet most patients with diabetes have never once been told that the timing and method of their water consumption could be a meaningful variable in their blood sugar control. With Margaret, I did not change her medications. I did not change her diet. All I did was teach her what I am about to teach you, a structured approach to hydration that works with the body's natural metabolic rhythms, not against them. Within 6 weeks, her fasting glucose variability reduced significantly. By the time we checked her A1C 3 months later, it had dropped to 7.6. That single point of difference, achieved without any pharmaceutical change, reduced her long-term risk of kidney complications and diabetic neuropathy substantially. So let me explain exactly what this approach looks like and why each component matters. The first and most critical window is the morning, immediately after waking. When you wake up, your body has been without water for 6 to 8 hours. During sleep, you lose fluid through respiration and perspiration. Your blood is at that moment at its most concentrated point of the day. Simultaneously, your body is naturally releasing a surge of cortisol, the stress hormone that gives you energy to start the day, but that also triggers a rise in blood sugar through a process called gluconeogenesis, where the liver releases stored glucose into the bloodstream. This is sometimes called the dawn phenomenon, and for diabetics, it is one of the reasons why morning fasting glucose readings can be frustratingly high even after a good night's sleep. What a glass of water, ideally warm or room temperature, around 8 to 12 ounces, does in this first window is profoundly important. It begins rehydrating the blood, reducing the concentration of glucose already present. It stimulates the kidneys to begin their filtering work, and warm water, specifically, has been shown in gastrointestinal research to activate the metabolic process of the digestive system more gently than cold water, which can cause a slight vasoconstrictive response that delays absorption. If you can add a small amount of fresh lemon juice, just half a lemon squeezed into that morning water, you introduce citric acid, which has been studied for its role in slowing gastric emptying and slightly blunting the cortisol response. This is not a magic ingredient. It is a small, scientifically reasonable addition that costs nothing and carries no risk for the vast majority of people. I always told Margaret to think of her morning water not as a drink, but as a metabolic reset, the first signal she sent her body each morning. The second critical window is the period before meals, specifically 15 to 20 minutes before eating anything. This is one of the most well-documented and consistently underutilized strategies in blood sugar management for seniors. A 2015 study published in Obesity found that drinking approximately 500 milliliters of water, roughly 2 cups, before a meal reduced caloric intake in older adults by an average of 13%, simply due to the physical effect of gastric distension. But beyond appetite, pre-meal hydration does something even more significant for diabetics. It prepares the gastrointestinal environment so that the digestion of carbohydrates happens more gradually. When the stomach and small intestine are well hydrated, the enzymatic processes that break down starches into glucose operate more evenly. The result is a slower, more controlled rise in post-meal blood glucose, the spike that cardiologists and endocrinologists fear most in older patients. I always described it to my patients this way. Imagine your digestive system as a river. When the riverbed is dry, water rushes through violently after a rainstorm. It floods, it overflows, it causes damage. When the river already has a healthy base level of water, rain is absorbed gradually, flows calmly, and does far less harm. Drinking water before meals is how you keep your metabolic river flowing steadily. The third window is mid-afternoon, roughly between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. This is a time that most seniors ignore from a hydration standpoint, and it is also the time when, in my clinical observation, blood glucose tends to rise inexplicably, hours after lunch without any additional food intake. Patients would show me their readings and say, "Doctor, I didn't eat anything between noon and dinner, and my blood sugar went up. How is that possible?" And the answer, very often, was sitting right there in their forgetfulness. They had not had any water since lunch. The afternoon dehydration had silently concentrated their blood. Their kidneys had slowed down glucose clearance, and the numbers reflected it. A simple intervention, 1 glass of water, pure and uncomplicated between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, addresses this drift. For some of my patients, I recommended herbal infusions during this window: dried mulberry leaf tea, cinnamon-steeped water, or unsweetened hibiscus tea. Each of these has been studied in the context of blood glucose regulation. A 2013 review in Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine cited mulberry leaf extract's role in inhibiting alpha-glucosidase, an enzyme involved in carbohydrate digestion. Cinnamon has been examined in dozens of clinical trials, with several meta-analyses suggesting that 1 to 3 grams per day may improve insulin sensitivity in type 2 diabetics. Hibiscus, rich in anthocyanins, has demonstrated mild blood pressure lowering and anti-inflammatory effects that are clinically relevant to the diabetic cardiovascular risk profile. I want to be honest with you. None of these are replacements for medication or medical supervision, but they are real, accessible, evidence-informed additions to a hydration practice that, by itself, already does meaningful work. The fourth and final window is the early evening, in the hour before the last meal of the day. The rationale here mirrors the pre-lunch strategy. Hydrating before dinner helps regulate the pace of glucose absorption from the evening meal, which is often the largest caloric event of the day for many seniors. There is also an important secondary benefit. Drinking adequately before dinner reduces the likelihood of mistaking thirst for hunger, a phenomenon that is particularly common in older adults due to the same blunted thirst sensitivity I described earlier. Many evening snacking behaviors that patients blamed on appetite were, in fact, disguised dehydration. Once they began drinking a full glass of water 30 minutes before dinner, the urge to snack afterward diminished considerably. One thing I must address directly because it comes up in almost every conversation I have about senior hydration: the fear of drinking water at night. Many older adults deliberately avoid water in the evenings because they are afraid of having to get up to urinate in the middle of the night. This is a legitimate concern, particularly for those at risk for falls. And it is also, unfortunately, a concern that leads to chronic overnight dehydration, which raises morning fasting glucose readings and places stress on the kidneys. The solution is not to avoid hydration entirely in the evening. It is to concentrate the majority of your daily water intake in the first 2/3 of your day, morning through mid-afternoon, so that by the time evening arrives, your body's hydration needs are largely met, and you require only small maintenance sips rather than full glasses. The total daily water target for most seniors is somewhere between 6 and 8 cups of plain water per day. This can be adjusted upward slightly on warmer days, after physical activity, or when fevers or illness are present. Coffee and regular tea count partially, though their mild diuretic effect means they should not be the primary source. Soups, fruits, and vegetables also contribute meaningful fluid volume. A bowl of broth-based soup, a serving of cucumber or watermelon, and deserve credit in the daily total. What doesn't count, and what actively undermines everything I have described, is sweetened beverages. Fruit juice, even 100% natural juice, delivers a concentrated glucose load with none of the fiber that slows absorption in whole fruit. Sodas, even diet sodas, have been associated in observational studies with disruptions in the gut microbiome that negatively affect insulin signaling. Sports drinks, unless you are an endurance athlete, contain unnecessary sugars and salts that do more harm than good. And flavored waters with added sweeteners, natural or artificial, introduce variables that complicate blood sugar management in ways that are not always predictable. Water. Plain, well-timed, intentional water. That is the foundation. Margaret stayed with my practice for several years. She eventually brought her husband, then her neighbor, then 2 women from her church group. They all had the same story: managing diabetes with medication and diet, doing their best, and still feeling like something was missing. For every single one of them, addressing hydration as a structured, timed daily practice made a measurable difference. Not in isolation, not as a replacement for their medical care, but as a layer of support that their bodies had been waiting for. I think about the simplicity of it sometimes. We have built an entire industry around diabetes management: glucose monitors, insulin analogs, GLP-1 receptor agonists, continuous glucose sensors, and all of them have their place. But underneath all of that technology, the human body still runs on water, the same water it has always run on. And when that water is given to it thoughtfully, consistently, and at the right moments, the body responds with something close to gratitude. If you are watching this and you have diabetes, or you are pre-diabetic, or you care for someone who is, I want you to start tomorrow morning with a glass of warm water before anything else. Not coffee, not medication, water first, and pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to your reading. Do it every day for 2 weeks and track the pattern. You may be surprised by what you find. And if you want to go deeper, if you want to understand not just how water affects your blood sugar, but what is truly happening inside your body when diabetes progresses, what the long-term consequences of uncontrolled glucose are, what natural strategies have real scientific backing, and how to build a comprehensive daily routine that supports your metabolic health from the inside out, check the first link in the description of this video. We have put together a complete guide covering everything: blood sugar control, insulin resistance, the complications of diabetes, and the natural approaches that science actually supports. It is there for you, because this information should not be locked away from the people who need it most. This channel exists for one reason only: to give you the kind of education that most medical appointments don't have time for. Every video we make is built on the same principle that guided my 30 years of practice: that informed patients make better decisions, live longer, and feel better doing it. If what you heard today made sense to you, if it gave you something useful, something actionable, something you can bring into your life starting tomorrow morning, subscribe to this channel, not for the numbers. Because the next video we post may be the one that answers the question you didn't even know you had yet. And I want you to be there when it arrives. Take care of yourself. Drink your water. And I will see you in the next one.